It's hard not to laugh at the dysfunction that's been on display in the House for the past several days. The long, drawn-out election for House Speaker was, in many ways, absurd. Kevin McCarthy lost 14 votes before he finally wrangled enough of his fellow Republicans to vote his way, with the second-to-last vote nearly ending in a brawl on the House floor after an apparent math error led McCarthy and his supporters to believe they had enough votes. As Jon Stewart wrote on Twitter, this is the best season of C-SPAN ever. But while it's entertaining to be sure, the chaos is not without its consequences. To win over several of the so-called never Kevins, McCarthy had to make some major concessions that weaken his power as Speaker, some of which he agreed to include in the rules package the House is preparing to vote for at the time of this taping. Among them, one rule that would allow just one member to start the process of removing him from the speakership, and another that would force lawmakers to make spending cuts in order to raise the debt ceiling. As political historian and Yale professor Joanne Freeman warned in the New York Times, the House has elected a speaker, but that won't put an end to the internecine Republican battles. They will continue, entangling Congress and stymieing national politics in the process. Joanne is also the author of The Field of Blood Violence in Congress and the Road to Civil War, and a co-host of the Politics and History podcast Now and Then. She joins me now, as does Jesse Mermell, founder and president of deWit Impact Group. Welcome to both of you. Joanne, I want to start with you because that fight on the floor, that near fight on the floor Friday night or Saturday morning, I'm not sure what happened, between Representative Mike Rogers and Representative Rich Hudson on the anniversary, the second anniversary of the siege of the Capitol, was both entertaining and horrifying to me at the same time. What was your reaction?
Well, that was certainly one of my reactions was, wait, it's January 6th, and some of the people involved in this moment, in one way or another, may be connected with what happened. So, in one way or another, there hasn't been a lot of high-level accountability for that. And so here we have the exact anniversary of it, and this is happening. On top of that, as a historian who deals with basically members of Congress behaving badly in one way or another, particularly physical violence, that is not a thing I expected to see. And I've almost joked about that over the years. People say, well, I bet you're waiting for the violence. Like, oh, no, but there won't be that sort of thing. That mostly happened before the Civil War.
And Jesse, you, of course, have run for Congress. And our C-SPAN cameras, which folks may not understand, that usually C-SPAN has to do what the speaker tells them to do. Since there was no speaker, they were able to actually look at the audience, look at the members of Congress and what they were doing while votes were happening and the deals that were being made. What was your reaction to this whole debacle and final success for McCarthy over the past week?
Well, first of all, a real tip of the cap to the staff at C-SPAN that went above and beyond to give all of us, all jokes aside, a really important, transparent view into what was happening in our own government. It's a real case to be made for why we need to see how the sausage is made, as ugly as it can be, as violent as unfortunately it can be. While there were unquestionably very entertaining moments over the course of those many days, I found it to be incredibly sad. Incredibly sad to see that the Speaker of the House is now essentially controlled and held hostage by some of the most extreme far-right voices in American politics today. And that, as you mentioned at the opening of this segment, Sue, has made incredibly troubling concessions in order to gain that power, limited though it may be in his new role, to folks who are, quite frankly, some of the most dangerous players in D.C. right now. So all jokes aside, it was very, very upsetting as someone who cares about the future of our democracy.
Jesse, I want to dig in a little bit and ask you what, and again, the rules package we haven't fully seen, and there are things that we believe McCarthy has conceded to which we don't know about. So we're reporting still in a little bit of a vague area. But what are you concerned about that we believe McCarthy conceded to?
Well, as you pointed out, the fact that any one member can call into question his role as Speaker of the House means that just one far-right extremist individual who's upset about who knows what, can throw the entire House and the progress of the business of the American people into disarray. Obviously, there needs to be accountability for any speaker, but for one voice to be able to have that power just seems absolutely ridiculous to me. And given the extremist views that we see advancing, unfortunately, in Republican politics today, additional voices joining this new Congress, I feel that Kevin McCarthy has not just put handcuffs on himself, he's put handcuffs on Congress's ability to do the work of the American people.
So, Joanne, the dust hasn't settled yet, so we don't have the ability to kind of look back, as you will as a historian, and say this is what the consequences of this week are. But the unintended consequences of what McCarthy did could be bounty for Democrats. I have to say, looking at some of the rules changes that are suggested, some of them make sense, like allowing more time for all members of Congress to look at bills so that they can participate more in whether the bills move forward or what should be in the bills, not just a top-down, speaker says this is how it has to be, so this is how it's going to be. And, also just some other little tinkering to the rules part. This could actually set up for moderate Republicans, and I'm using the term moderate compared to the other Republicans that are on the floor, moderate Republicans to align with Democrats in order to work to get things passed, not only for the Biden administration that both parties may agree on, but also for the Republicans, the moderate Republicans, to conserve their spot. Is this something that could happen? Could McCarthy end up regretting this? And could, the no Kevins and the 20 or so that were opposing a speaker, McCarthy as speaker, could they end up regretting this?
Well, it's possible. I mean, the fact of the matter is, at this point, there are many things that are possible. And certainly the scenario that you just sketched out is very possible. We live in an age when politics is so contingent and there's such a wide spectrum of things that can happen. It's pretty remarkable, and this is one of those moments to an extreme. The thing that I end up thinking about, and as you just mentioned, we don't know about the rules package. But looking in the long view at the history of Congress, the ultimate way in which you can twist Congress and get it to do things it's not necessarily intended to do is playing with the rules. And there's a reason why it's so important at the beginning of a session to deal with those rules, because they basically control how people engage with each other on the floor. So, when I was looking at this long history of violence in Congress, very often it's the rules that people are deploying or twisting or violating, and then kind of daring people to say something about rules violated. So I'm very much waiting. I suppose I'm going to be thinking step by step about what's happening here, but that's the next thing I'm interested in. And, I don't know. The last thing I read was that some of it is open and some of it is not, that there are some things that we don't know. Those are pretty important things. It would be hard to exaggerate the degree to which rules can be weapons in Congress if they're deployed the right way.
Jesse, it's shocking from a political standpoint. You have the Republican Party that had this major victory with the reversal of Roe v. Wade. They have a Supreme Court which is seated with people that they would want, that they hope are going to rule in the favor of Republican values and morals and agenda items. And then they win in Congress, even though by a slim margin, but in a year that people thought at least I thought it could have been worse for them, so they win. And then the first thing they do is they go in and have a very public fight about trying to pick a speaker who is going to set their agenda for the next 2 years. What are you hearing from people in the Republican Party about what this means for them as we are in this presidential campaign season now?
Well, Sue, you'll be shocked to hear my list of Republican sources is not the size of an old phone book. Not necessarily my world, but as I talk to friends who are, sort of the what we think of as the New England Republicans of yore, right? Few and far between these days. They are, as they have been for years since Donald Trump came down that escalator, they are horrified. They are horrified to see a party that, while I vehemently disagree with so many, if not all, of their principles, did play a role in American politics, in some cases a valuable role, that they are literally fighting. I was going to say infighting, but they are literally fighting on the floor of the House. And, you pointed out all of the things that seemingly have gone in Republicans' favor over the past few years, and the fact that they're still fighting. From my perspective, that means they are not driven by issues. They are not driven by values. They are driven by the pure and simple seeking of power, right? Kevin McCarthy was willing to cave on so many vital things just to have his name on that plaque above the Speaker's office, just to hold that gavel in his hand. They are not driven by any core set of goals for the future of this country or the future of the American people. They are driven by wanting to have power to make their friends in power richer and more powerful. And I hope that American voters are seeing this for what it is as they lay it bare literally on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Joanne, I want to take your temperature on the messaging around this historically and what it means around the world. We are, watching the majority of Republicans on the floor of Congress trying to reject these 20, most of whom were election deniers. We can just go down the list, and those Republicans on the floor trying to take a step away from them, while we're watching across the world the same architects of the January 6th insurrection planting the seeds in other parts. How worried are you that we are now in a new era where people will be easily swayed by this mis and disinformation from this playbook, this January 6th election denier playbook?
Oh, I'm very worried. I mean, in part, I suppose, because there is a long history of people looking to the United States for certainly political guidance in one way or another, and this is not the particular guidance we want to send. But I think more than that, particularly in a large and influential nation like the United States, what happens here, in a sense, normalizes what's going on. And particularly given the lack of accountability in so many ways for what's happened in, what January 6th represents, still, it baffles me as a historian that some people aren't accepting the fact that that was an attack on our government to overturn an election. That was basically an attempted coup, right? That's pretty major. And the fact that there isn't accountability, not only normalizes that kind of behavior without drawing a line and saying, no, we have to hold everyone accountable. That certainly suggests to the United States, other political players here, and the world at large, that kind of behavior now is within the realm of the acceptable in politics. It's really striking to look at what's happening in Brazil right now and comparing it with what went on January 6th. And I find myself thinking, well, how are they going to address this? Will they hold anyone accountable? The fact that I'm comparing sort of January 6th-esque insurrections is alarming, beyond striking, alarming.
Jesse, as we finish up here, I heard a number of Republicans last week on television singing Nancy Pelosi's praises and how she was able to corral and manage her herd, if you will, when she was Speaker. Is this burnishing Nancy Pelosi's image?
I think it absolutely is. Listen, I haven't always disagreed with her. I wish she would have pushed through some more progressive policies that I think she left on the table. But there is no doubt about her skill as a tactician and a strategist, and her strength in being willing to stand up and draw a line in the sand when necessary. Strength that Kevin McCarthy appears to not have in spades, lack in spades. And he's proven himself at the first moment of being Speaker willing to cave. And Nancy Pelosi, I don't think, like her or hate her, I don't think anyone considers her a woman who was willing to cave.
I have to say, I'm also struck by everyone calls him Kevin. That's the thing that's also striking me. I've never, ever heard an elected official who was running for a leadership position referred to by their first name as often as that. So we'll see how Kevin does. We'll see.
I mean,
chime in for a moment.
Hillary.
Right, but as a, we'll see. We'll continue this. All right, Joanne Freeman and Jesse Mermell, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.